On behalf of the League, I welcome you to our presentation today on the national popular vote. This program is being recorded and will be available on our League website. Any use of the recording other than individuals viewing must get the permission of the League. At the end of the presentations by our speakers, they will be taking questions. Please put your questions in chat. Ginger McCallan, our Government Action Team Chair, will be monitoring chat and will be asking questions that have been submitted via chat. Our speakers today are Daniel Lishansky. Did I say that correctly?
Lishansky.
Lishansky. Apologize. Lishansky. No, and he said we can call him Danny today. He will present on how national popular vote will enable the candidate with the most votes to become president, always. We have Patrick Rosenstiel, who was instrumental in bringing Minnesota in 2023 into NPV, and Deb Mazzaferro, who will bring us up to speed on efforts in Florida to have this state join the National Popular Vote Compact. Danny is our first speaker, and he is chair of the Palm Beach County District of Floridians for National Popular Vote, a nonpartisan organization partnered with the League of Women Voters. He also sits on the statewide steering committee of Floridians for National Popular Vote. Danny spent 23 years with the Nassau County Police Department in New York, retiring as a deputy chief. During his career, he earned a law degree from St. John's University School of Law and practiced law in New York State. In addition to the National Popular Vote, Danny has been active with several civil rights and nonprofit groups and regularly registers new voters as part of his work with the League of Women Voters of Palm Beach County. Danny, please.
Thank you very much. Let me just get to my screen share. Oops. This always takes more buttons than it should. Okay, everyone, I'm on screen share. Everything looks good?
It looks good to me.
Great. Okay, so let's get right to it. Great. So I want to start off by just asking you two questions for you to think about. Number one, do you think every vote in an election should count? And number two, do you think every vote should count equally? It's hard to believe, but there are over 519,000 elected officials across the United States. And only the president and vice president don't need the most votes to win. And we're familiar with that. We're familiar that the Constitution sets up a different election system for president using electors. So every state has a certain number of electors, and it's equal to the combined total of representatives and senators in each state. So there are 538 electors across 50 states and the District of Columbia. 270 is the magic number. That's how many electoral votes are needed to win. That's the number we're going to keep in mind when we talk later. So no matter how many popular votes a candidate gets, 270 electoral votes, that's what makes the winner. Twice in the last 20 years, as I'm sure everyone in this room remembers, the second place candidate in the popular vote won the presidency because they received more electoral votes. Fewer popular votes, more electoral votes. And it happened 3 times in the 1800s. So a lot of people say we should just abolish the Electoral College. Its time has come. We should just have a nationwide election. The problem with that idea is that it would be almost impossible, especially in our current environment. It would require 2/3 agreement of both houses of Congress, and then 3/4 agreement of the states. So I think we all know that that's not going to happen soon. However, there is another way to fix the problem. The Constitution says that each state legislature chooses the system to award their electors, and legislatures can change their system by changing their law. So for instance, Massachusetts has changed their system 11 times. We're used to, on election night, seeing one candidate win an entire state. What I mean is that all the electoral votes in that state go to the one candidate. But in the beginning, that's not how it was done. It's not the way it was designed. In the first elections, all electoral votes for all the candidates went towards their nationwide total. And that started to change rather quickly. The third election, 1796, this is where we see the political parties emerging and beginning to manipulate the Electoral College. In that election, Adams beat Jefferson by 3 electoral votes, just 3. And if you look at Pennsylvania, Virginia, and North Carolina, you'll see that Jefferson, the one in green, received all the electoral votes in each of those 3 states except 1 per state. Those 3 votes for Adams went towards his nationwide total, and lo and behold, he won the election by 3 votes. Well, needless to say, Jefferson and others were not happy, and they said, you know what if we could co-opt that 1 vote? What if the fact that we won most of the votes in the state gave us the right to take all of the votes in the state? Well, that's what happened. Virginia passed a law, then other states passed a law, and it's called winner take all. And today it's used by 48 states. And what it says is the candidate who wins the most votes in the state will receive all that state's electoral votes. In effect, it strips electoral votes from the second and third place candidates and gives them to the highest vote getter in the state. A bigger problem is winner take all creates swing states and spectator states. Let me show you how that's a problem. We know that in presidential elections, winners in more than half the states are announced even before all votes are officially counted. The reason is that most states are spectator states. They are predictable, and they are predictably red or blue. We know that the candidate is going to win those spectator states, either the red candidate or the blue candidate. Swing states, on the other hand, are states that can go red or blue in an election. They're not predictable. What happens is the real election takes place in those 12 or fewer swing states. Those are the ones in play, and those are the ones that determine the president. In 2020, just to give you an example, there were 12 swing states. 96% of all general election campaign events by the candidates were in these 12 states. And this is how many campaign visits there were by those candidates in these 12 states. What's more important is 33 states did not have even one event with the candidates because those states are predictably red or blue. And candidates don't want to waste their time or their money in states they cannot win or in states they cannot lose. They spend all their time in the swing states. What's also important is that swing states change. And what's happening is there are fewer and fewer swing states in each election. In 2024, at most, there will be 9 swing states. And most people think there will be just 5. And the voters in those few states will determine the outcome of the election. It's unfortunate, but whether your vote matters for president depends on whether you live in a swing state. And notice that for the first time in decades, Florida is not expected to be a swing state. So with only 9 or fewer of these swing states, what it means is less than 20% of the population is deciding the presidency. If it's not bad enough that winner take all means just a handful of swing states determine the president, it gets a little worse. In the last 5 elections, the highest nationwide vote getters have received from 3 million to 9 million more votes than their second place candidate. But because of those few swing states, and because they're so closely split, elections are really decided by just thousands of voters in those swing states and not the millions of voters nationwide. Let me give you an example. In 2020, Joe Biden won by 7 million votes across the country. But a flip of just 29,500 votes to Trump in just 3 states would have made him the winner. And in 2016, Clinton received 3 million more votes nationwide than Trump, but lost. And the reason? She needed a shift of 39,000 votes in 3 states, just those 3 swing states. And if she had that shift to her, she would have won. So her 3 million votes were somewhat meaningless because those 39,000 votes determined the winner. And this is not about just the last 2 elections, and it's not about Trump. If we go back to 2004, you see that George Bush beat John Kerry by 3 million votes. Well, if there was a shift of just 0.1% of the voters in Ohio, 0.1%, Kerry would have won Ohio, the Electoral College, and the presidency. The biggest problem is that these narrow electoral wins, where less than 0.5% of voters change the election, it also generally ends up with recounts and audits and lawsuits with judges deciding elections. A losing candidate might be able to alter 21,500 votes, the amount that was needed in 2020, but overturning 3 million, 7 million, 9 million votes nationwide, that would be nearly impossible. So I'd like to say that's as bad as it gets, but it gets a little worse. So in addition to swing states choosing the president, in addition to elections being decided by less than 0.5%, there's further inequity because some people have 2, 3, and 4 times the voting power of others. So here's a graph I made up to try to explain this. Starting on the left, you can see how many people are represented by electors. And as you move to the right, you can see that one elector represents more and more people. So on the left, you look at Vermont. An elector there represents about 200,000 people. And if you move all the way to the right, an elector in Florida represents around 760,000 people. So what that means is the Vermont elector represents significantly fewer people than the Florida elector, but has the same 1 vote as the Florida elector. So I asked at the start if every vote should count and if every vote should count equally. And under a system of 1 person, 1 vote, a fundamental American principle, it's violated by the presence of swing states and winner take all and the current allocation of electors. So how do we make every vote count and not just swing state votes? How do we make every vote count equally? Well, the answer is the national popular vote. It is an interstate compact approved by states who choose to participate. Those states agree to change how they award their electoral votes, and it will guarantee the presidency to the candidate who receives the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia combined. Some of the features of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact are that it respects states' rights. There's no change to the Constitution. In fact, it does just what the Constitution directs. It leaves the power in each state legislature to change how they award electors. Candidates will end up campaigning in all states because candidates will need everyone's vote, not just the votes of a small number of swing states. And candidates will move away from the extremes and stop campaigning just to special interest groups, because once again, it needs everyone's vote. And lastly, national popular vote is supported by Democrats and Republicans and more than 65% of the population. So, sounds great, wishful thinking? Well, you may not be aware, but the national popular vote has already been enacted into law by 16 states and the District of Columbia, a total of 205 electoral votes. From here, just 65 more electoral votes are needed to reach that magic 270 and then the national popular vote will go into effect. Every state, when it goes into effect, every state will still maintain its current number of electoral votes. That doesn't change. It's just that the states that opt into national popular vote agree to stop using winner take all in their states. And instead, they'll cast their electoral votes for the person who wins the most popular votes throughout the nation. And by the way, states that don't join the national popular vote can continue to use winner take all or any other method. But all votes in every state, even states that don't opt in, will count towards the total popular votes nationwide. So I gave you a lot of information. I'm going to leave you, this is going to be in your chat, two great websites, Floridians for NPV.com, nationalpopularvote.com, and an excellent book, Every Vote Equal, available on Amazon for under $5. So I hope it was
It was
very informative.
eye-opening. It was eye-opening. At least I speak for myself. Thank you, Danny, so very much. I'm
Sure.
going to move on to our second speaker, Patrick Rosenstiel. Patrick is a nationally recognized figure in the world of public affairs, international relations, public relations, and market research. In addition to his work as the CEO of Ainsley Shea, a Twin Cities-based public affairs firm with a worldwide impact, Rosenstiel presently serves as the senior consultant to the National Popular Vote campaign. Pat?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Grateful to be here. I got to tell everybody, somebody else sent that bio in for me. That's like arrogant, but at any rate, I'm grateful to be here. I think all of what it said is, true anyway. But just here is a guy who supports national popular vote and national popular vote for president, loves the work that Floridians for National Popular Vote does. Believe it's important work in Florida, just like I believe it's important work in all states, because what happens in every state sort of lends to the effort to get the movement to 270 electoral votes, as Danny so eloquently sort of described, right? We don't need a constitutional amendment to have a national popular vote for president. I should say the story that was told about Birch Bayh. Senator Bayh, big supporter of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I've been involved in the movement. I've been senior consultant to the organization since 2007. The first state considered the bill in 2006. Senator Bayh was on our original steering committee board, along with my home state senator, a guy named Dave Durenberger. And I happen to be a Republican, just for the record. So where Danny says that National Popular Vote is a group of Republicans, Democrats, and independents who simply believe that one person, one vote is a foundational value of American democracy. I happen to be living proof of that. I think the reason, and Dave Durenberger, the senator who was on our steering board with Senator Bayh, he was a Republican from my home state of Minnesota. And so, just know that that's my background, my bias, my politics, and my partisanship. Not that one of the reasons I'm for a national popular vote for president is because I think we focus way too much on partisanship in this country and need to focus on sort of moving things forward. But at any rate, I guess I was invited here because I'm a Minnesotan and I was here on the ground when we added the last state to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. It was my home state of Minnesota, 10 electoral votes. It took us over the 200 electoral vote threshold. I guess I've been here for enactment in all the other states leading up to that, the 16 states in the District of Columbia. I was involved in all those efforts, but it was nice to get my home state involved in the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, because if you know anything about Minnesota, we are the only state that voted for Walter Mondale. So as a Republican trapped behind the blue wall under the current system, I could have stayed home and cleaned my gutter in every presidential election year. I mean, we're totally ignored in presidential elections. I think Danny nicely included us in the battleground states in the upcoming election. I guess I'll believe that when I see it. But the truth is, I believe every voter in Minnesota should matter as much as every voter in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, North Dakota, California, Texas, you name it. I think we should all have a equal voice in presidential elections, because I think that will help us get better at living with the results. I guess I'm here to say that, we started our effort in Minnesota in 2007. Our now Secretary of State, Steve Simon, was the original sponsor of the National Popular Vote Bill. He and I are friends, though we don't share a political party. We certainly share a passion for this issue. And I think we grew up in a time where we can disagree without being disagreeable on some stuff. But Steve Simon introduced the bill in 2007. On 2009 and 2010, built a coalition of Republicans and Democrats in the Minnesota legislature. I think we had as many Republican sponsors on the bill as we did Democrats in 2009, 2010. We ran into some gavel issues, which you run into when you're trying to pass legislation. The chairman of the Senate Elections Committee wasn't a fan and wouldn't schedule our bill for a vote. We had the votes to pass it. But as you know, there are systems in place that make it difficult to pass bills. And in this case, it was a chairman who was willing to block it. The chairman blocked it for about 12 years, and then we finally dispensed with her, and we had a better environment in which to move our bill. So in 2023, in March, the environment was right for the National Popular Vote Bill to move forward in a nonpartisan fashion with bipartisan support. And we enacted the bill after 15 years of shoulder to the wheel activity. Now, I will say, there was different shoulders to the wheel when the environment was ripe, or when we were laying the groundwork initially, right? We had a very heavy push early on in 2009, 2010, 2011. We piled on sponsors in a bipartisan way because we believe the framing of the bill was kind of important, that, this isn't a Democrat or Republican plot to do anything. It's simply a movement to make sure that every American voter has an equal voice in presidential elections. We built that voice in a very effective way here in Minnesota. And then every legislative session, we introduced bills. So in a place like Florida, where they tell you things like this can't get done, I kind of heard the same thing for a long time here in Minnesota. And I can tell you that after 15 years of building the right kind of support, asking the right kind of people to sign on to this bill as sponsors, with the right kind of pressure from the public, who increasingly is demanding a national popular vote for president. And I think it's because most voters are tired of tribalism, you know what I mean? Partisanship, thinking about ourselves as red America or blue America, which the current system forces us to do. I think, if you go out and do some of your own research and see the recent Pew data, Pew polling, independent polling on this issue, you'll notice some important things. Danny pointed us to that. 65% of the American voters want a national popular vote for president. That includes over 60% of moderate and liberal Republicans. It includes 40% of self-described conservative Republicans like myself. That's 4 out of 10. It includes 8 out of 10 or more than 8 out of 10 Democrats. And more importantly, what I look at is the cohort of young voters in America. 7 out of 10 voters under the age of 25, 26, whatever they use at Pew. 7 out of 10 young voters want a national popular vote for president. They don't understand why we don't have one. So while I started this effort, not just in Minnesota, but nationally in 2006, which is when the first bills, or 2007, 1 year after the first bills were considered in places like Maryland and New Jersey. When I started, I was like, if this happens, it's going to be the best thing that ever happened for the quality of our American democracy, right? I think it will result in a reinvigoration of grassroots politics in a way that I think is vitally important to the American political system, having some experience around that system through a lifetime. I used to say it was going to be great if, my home state of Minnesota just took us to 205 electoral votes. If if you look closely at the map that Danny shared, we've passed one chamber or another, and some of them the most Republican chambers in the country, with 78 electoral votes in 8 additional states. That's more than the 65 electoral votes required. We're at various stages of development in other states. Certainly, we're in a stage of development in Florida with what I believe is the strongest grassroots operation that we have in any state. And I can tell you, by introducing bills in Florida, by building sort of support for this bill in Florida through legislative support and sponsors, you are sending a signal to the rest of the country that Florida is considering and may be in at some point in time the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And I can promise you there's one person, there may be many people on this call, but I'm one person on this call that believes that Florida will belong in the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. Because voters in Florida should always matter in presidential elections. You know what I mean? And the only way to ensure the permanent relevance of Florida voters or any voter in every state is by passing the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So with 205 electoral votes, it's no longer if, it's a matter of when. Because the current system is crushing under its own weight. What Danny points out is exactly true. A court in a battleground state is more likely to determine the outcome of the 2024 presidential election than any voter in any state, including the battleground states, by decisions they make about how ballots are counted or not counted. You know what I mean? How we protect the integrity of the ballot box and or purge voter rolls, right? Like in the end, what we need is a system where every American voter, no matter what zip code they live in, no matter what party they're a part of, feels and is in actuality valued in electing the president of the United States. And I think collectively, not that we can get it done, collectively we will get it done. And I'm highly confident in that. So grateful to be here. I guess my message is keep your shoulder to the wheel. If you believe that the candidate with the most votes should be elected president of the United States, if you believe that every voter in every state should be politically relevant in every presidential election, and if you want voters, not battleground states, determining the outcome of presidential elections, there's only one plan to do it, and it's the plan at nationalpopularvote.com, which is the same plan at Floridians for nationalpopularvote.com. So, I hope you'll all get involved, stay involved, and help us get this done. And I'm just grateful for the opportunity and invitation to be here. Ruth, you're on mute.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very, very, very much for joining us. Very clear, inspiring. And now I'm going to introduce Deb Mazzaferro because she's here in Florida. And as Pat said, it's a very effective grassroots push. They've got their shoulders to the wheel, and we really want to continue that. Deb believes the National Popular Vote is Interstate Compact is the best way to ensure every vote counts in electing the president and vice president. Since 2017, she has been an advocate, subject matter expert, and founding member of Floridians for the National Popular Vote. Deb's role includes building coalitions, marketing, and legislative advocacy. And Deb is here to enlighten us about this interstate compact effort in the state of Florida. Deb, please.
Deb, just 1 second, if I can just say you grabbed the screen share of the wrong screen so we can see your PowerPoint notes and stuff. I don't know if you're trying to do that. It's okay. I mean, we can understand it, but there you go. I think that works better. Thanks.
No, I don't know that I did anything. Okay. Hi, everybody. I started my journey with National Popular Vote through the League of Women Voters. I became a subject matter expert through the League. And in 2017, met my comrade in arms, Kathleen Crampton, many of you know her. And at some point we decided that we would take this battle out on its own and form Floridians for National Popular Vote. So that was in 2017. What I'm going to go through here is what is it exactly that we're doing in Florida? So, you know, we've been doing this for, this is our 6th or 7th year. We were fortunate at that time that we had a sponsor already for the bill, both in the House and the Senate. And we've been able to keep that bill alive, even though at least one of our sponsors has had to move on through term limits. But what we've done is we started by going to Tallahassee and knocking on doors. We work with the district legislative visits. We ask everybody that we talk to co-sponsor, and we built this over a period of time. What you don't see is some of the marketing we do directly to the legislators. So if you're interested in getting our updates, we have updates that we provide to the general population if you're interested, but we do a very concentrated campaign every Friday at 10 o'clock. The legislators get something during session, trying to keep our bill top of mind and to keep them inspired to either co-sign, because some of them forget to fill out paperwork, or our goal right now, as you can see in Dan's map, we've never had a hearing in Florida, right? So we're and I don't know if you realize, you probably do, most of you follow this stuff pretty closely, but there's over 3,000 bills filed every legislative session, and this legislative session's 8 weeks. So getting a hearing, would be a real coup. Actually, Rosie came one year to Tallahassee because we did have a hearing based on a House resolution. So we were able to get up and talk. Rosie and Kathleen went to Tallahassee to do that. So we did get a little bit of space at one point. Let's see. So these are our current sponsors. Michael Gottlieb has promised to sponsor again next year. Senator Torres is termed out, but we feel pretty confident of his successor, whoever that may be, being on board. But if not, we have several other potentials. And then that's the number of co-sponsors we've had over the last 3 years. We keep growing. We put a real effort in it. Originally, we were trying to get some Republicans, and of course, we just couldn't get anybody to help sponsor in Florida. It's just been a tough past 3 years, obviously. So this year we made a real concentrated effort to get every Democrat. And boy, we really got pretty far along, 24 between both House and Senate. And then there's, what can you do? I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly because you guys want you to have questions. But Maine is our next big target. We actually got word from our national grassroots liaison from National Popular Vote that they need text and phone banking on Wednesday and Thursday this week. So if you will get a hold of me, I will make sure you get that right information. These are some of the things you can do. You can go to our website, sign up for sending an email to your legislator. And that's relevant right now, especially because we're in session. Get on our newsletter. You can become a member of our team. We have 30 people all over the state. Or you can schedule an event like this, a speaker event, either in person or Zoom across the state. And then, network with your friends. Oh my gosh, there's actually this thing you can do. So some of our partners, League of Women Voters, obviously, National Popular Vote, the people who designed the bill, are a coalition member with us, Common Cause, and Every Vote Matters. So that's been around for quite a while also in this arena. These are our publications that we have. These are where you can sign up. You can sign up for both our event, our ongoing newsletters and updates, or at the National Popular Vote. And then this is how you get a hold of me. And, you know, like I said, we're really in need right now of people who would like to do text and phone banking. All right.
Deb, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate all three of our presenters, but Ginger, I would like to turn it over to you for questions from chat.
I have two questions currently, and please, others who would like to have their questions answered, please go ahead and get those in the chat. The first one I think would be, any of you could answer it, but maybe Danny, you would handle it. I think I heard you say with national popular vote, all of a state's electoral votes go to the winner of the national popular vote. Or could a state stipulate, is that true? Or could a state stipulate that the winner of their electoral votes would go to the winner of the popular vote in that state? How does that work?
So the way it's currently set up in 48 states with winner take all, it happens the second way, and that is the winner in a state of the most votes. So the person in Florida that wins the most votes gets all 30 electoral votes in Florida.
Okay.
And every state, 48 of them, do it the exact same way. What we're trying to do is get states to change their state legislation and say, we're going to cast our, in Florida, 30 electoral votes for the person that wins the most popular votes across the country. Count up the votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Candidate A has 100 votes and candidate B has 90 votes. We're going to cast our votes for candidate A. That's what national popular vote will do. So all of the states that opt in, their votes will be cast for the person that wins the most votes across the country. And it becomes effective when we have states equaling 270 electoral votes.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Deb, in Florida, you are working through the legislators to pass legislation. Could it also be done by a constitutional amendment initiated either by the legislators or by the citizens? A constitutional amendment to the state's constitution.
In theory, it could. Who's going to write the check for $10 million? Number one. And number two, as we all know, in Florida, we have citizens initiatives that our legislature then manages to find a workaround. So I think about those cases, it's probably a moot point. I think it was Rosie who mentioned that there's several states that are close or who have passed it in one house or the other. You know, there is a conversation about doing a citizens initiative in multiple states to get us over the hump to the last 40 or 60 that we need. Right now we need 65. Maine and Michigan are both very actively pursuing passing. That would put us at about 225. And so then we would only need about 45 more. And, you know, there's some talk about, could we make one big fell swoop and play, you know, do the advertising and the vote counting over multiple states with the same message. So that's a possibility.
Okay,
I would just,
Florida would not be one of those.
right.
Yeah. Well, and I would just add in Nevada, for example, Nevada, the House and the Senate passed the bill this legislative session as a constitutional amendment. Their law requires that if the legislature passes the constitutional amendment twice in two separate sessions, then it refers to the ballot for the voters. So in Nevada, the likely route is a constitutional amendment that is voted on by the voters of Nevada. So for whatever that's worth, I don't think it applies to Florida, but certainly it can occur that way.
Okay, all right.
Appropriately funded, as Deb very accurately points out.
Okay, all right. Ruth is asking, is there a risk of a state that is part of the compact to leave the compact? For example, Florida leaving the ERIC voting system that the supervisors of elections utilize.
Yes, there's a provision in the compact that allows them to leave, but it's 6 months in advance of any election. So they can't do it like on the eve of an election or the day after the election because they don't like the results.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
the other thing I think that's important to hear on that a little bit, Ruth, is like, first of all, I think there are political considerations. Most people believe that the withdrawal mechanism is a feature of the compact, not a bug, right? But the truth is there are protections in the language. Ruth talks about, sort of the 6-month window in which you cannot withdraw. That's from July 20th of a presidential year until after the next president's sworn in. So it's not going to happen during an election cycle. If states with 270 electoral votes are in the compact on July 20th of a presidential year, we're going to have a national popular vote for president. There's also a protection for the states that remain. Let's just assume a state withdraws and it dips below 270 electoral votes. You don't go back to zero. You know what I mean? The states revert back to their previous statute until you have 270 electoral votes on July 20th of a presidential year. So if they vote to withdraw, there's time for the compacting states to go find other states to have a national popular vote for president.
Okay. I'm going to read Dot's question. It is, I don't understand the 48 states with winner take all, but he said we have 16 states signed on to the NPV. So does that question make sense? I'm not sure it made sense to me.
Simple answer, and then I'll let Rosie give it a shot. So the simple answer is this is an interstate compact, and we have 16 states in the District of Columbia that have signed on, but it doesn't become effective until we have a total of 270 electoral votes. So we need another 4, 5, 6 states before it actually becomes effective. And then those states that have signed on will cast their electoral votes for the nationwide highest vote getter. Rosie, you want to add anything?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear, but it takes a while to get your head around. So I don't know who asked the question, but just understand that nothing changes for any of the compacting states unless you can guarantee the presidency with the 270 electoral votes. So how interstate compacts work, right, is they supersede all other state laws, but they always have a triggering mechanism. In this case, it's 270 electoral votes because that's a majority of the Electoral College. So the compacting states still have their state-based winner-take-all law on the books, but they have our 888 words that sit on top of that, and those take effect when we have a majority of the Electoral College, which is what guarantees the presidency. Now, why that's important is because no state wants to unilaterally disarm, right? They don't want to give their electoral votes to the candidate who wins the most popular votes in all 50 states or the national popular vote winner, unless the payoff is it actually delivers a national popular vote for president. So, that's how it works. I think the only thing that's important to remember is that when states pass our compact, our bill, interstate compacts are state laws, right? When states with 270 or more electoral votes pass our law and have them in place on July 20th of a presidential year, the compact triggers. Those states agree in block to award all of their electors, all 270, to the candidate who wins the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, which is commonly understood to be the national popular vote. So believe me when I say it's airtight. Believe me when I say every court in America is going to hold this thing up. And if you want a national popular vote for president, there's one way to get it, which is this plan, which means if you support a national popular vote for president, you can call your legislator and say, I support the national popular vote bill. So you can get bogged down in the mechanics if you want to. That's up to you. But in the end, the mechanics are airtight. It's enforced by what's called the Impairments Clause of the United States Constitution. Interstate compacts aren't rare things. Powerball is an interstate compact. If you want a national popular vote for president, one way it's going to happen, and it's this plan.
Okay. Dot, I asked Dot if it made sense, and she says got it. So
Yeah, it's hard. It
yeah.
takes a few
Thank
times
you.
to
No, that
hear
was a
that.
good
So,
conversation. Yeah.
yeah.
So she has another question, also a good one. What is the primary argument proposed by the naysayers? Why are they against it?
That's a great question. So I'm going to tell you the one that I love and I hear it all the time. If we had national popular vote, Los Angeles and New York City would elect the president. And that sort of sounds right when you hear it. The big states will elect the president until you look at the statistics and you say, wait a second. The top 100 cities have 20% of the population. The rural areas have 20% of the population. The rest of the country, suburbs and exurbs, have 60%. So if you're just going to let the urban areas pick the president, that's 20%. Your opponent's going to go after the other 80% of the votes. In addition, the one I love is, if you look at California and you look at the last 4 Republican governors in California, from Reagan to Schwarzenegger, not one of them won Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, or San Jose. So this idea that the cities don't even pick the governor in California. They're not picking the president. So that's one that always sounds good, but really doesn't work.
Yeah, and I would also say, I mean, what they do is they throw a whole bunch of little things at it that sound good, but don't pass the snuff test. Danny's giving you a good example there. I think in the end, there are 2 kinds of people that oppose national popular vote, right? They are, and I'm talking about at the legislative level, right? Like I think they're, and frankly, at the grassroots level to some extent. The 2 kinds of people that oppose them are people who are afraid of the voters or afraid of their ideas, right? And my hunch is that if you're afraid of the voters and or you're afraid of your ideas, you should probably get in a new line of work. You know, so in the end, I think it really boils down to something that is that simple. They know that New York and California, forget about New York City and Los Angeles. New York and California have 18% of the voters in a national popular vote election. When's the last time you saw 82% of the voters not control 18% of the voters? I mean, it's just silly on the math level. So what they do is throw out stuff like that and shout boo. And what they're really saying is, man, I'm afraid of voters. Well, the voters over time get what they want, and the opponents of national popular vote will be on the ash heap of history. There's no question about it.
So my favorite, not from being sarcastic, comment from people is, it's not what the founding fathers meant. And then they shut down. They will not listen to one other word. They do not want to know what the Constitution says. They believe they're in the heads of the founding fathers, and there's no way you can reach them. And to play on what Rosie said is, you know, they think the only way they can win is with the Electoral College. So therefore, they don't want to change their policy so that they're popular enough to win the popular vote.
and not what the founders wanted, right? The founders wrote pretty clearly, this world is full of people who waive the Constitution and don't read it, right? So Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. The founding fathers would want the states to do anything in their power to make their voters relevant in presidential elections. That's why they wrote what they wrote. That's why the history of how we end up with the current system is the history, right? States wanted to make their voters more relevant. Well, now, to say that the founders would prefer the current state-based winner-take-all system over a national popular vote would force me to believe that Jefferson would want a system where Virginia is totally irrelevant in presidential elections because it's a flyover state and totally ignored. Or Hamilton would support the current system, even though New York hasn't been campaigned to in a presidential election since 1960. Or that Adams thinks it's a good idea that Massachusetts is ignored in presidential elections. So it's like, again, it boils down to, I'm afraid of the voters, I'm afraid of my ideas. Well, get a new line of work as far as I'm concerned, because the voters are going to get what they want.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that does it for our questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ginger, and for the people who submitted questions. And thank you to each of our powerful speakers in terms of answering those questions very clearly. At this point, I am going to close our meeting by asking people to please visit our Manatee League site, lwvmanatee.org, for future events. You can see the benefit of Zoom is that we can bring in speakers from across the state and across the country that are experts in their field. Thursday, February 22nd at 5:30 is our every other month Taste of the League. So everyone is invited, people who are thinking of joining, people who are members, and friends and family and curiosity seekers are all welcome to the Taste of the League. This month at the Taste, we are highlighting our voter service action team and defending democracy. Our next